It was one of those winter nights when the cold didn't just touch the skin, it went straight to the bones. The hospital parking lot was almost empty except for a few cars under the dim yellow streetlights. A young nurse stood near the gate, her hands tucked deep into her thin coat pockets, trying to fight the freezing wind. She had worked through the night and her legs trembled from exhaustion. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and snow. Her name was Lena, and that night she had nowhere to go. Her landlord had thrown her things out 2 days earlier because she couldn't pay the rent. She had been sleeping in the hospital's break room, pretending she was just waiting for her next shift. But the head nurse had noticed and gently told her that it couldn't continue. So there she was, standing outside with a small bag, trying to decide where she would spend the night. The city around her was fast asleep. She could hear the sound of her own breathing, sharp and uneven. The bus stop across the street was empty. She thought about walking there, maybe sitting inside until morning. Her fingers were stiff and she rubbed them together, her breath forming little clouds in the air. A few minutes later, a sleek black car drove up to the hospital entrance. It wasn't the kind of car you saw often in this part of town. The driver stepped out and opened the back door. Lena looked up, not because she cared who it was, but because the car's headlights had flashed directly into her eyes. She recognized the man who stepped out. He was the man whose daughter she had been caring for the past few days in the pediatric ward. The little girl had been admitted with a bad fever. The father had been quiet and serious every time he visited, always dressed in neat suits, always speaking politely but with a distance that made people keep their space. The hospital staff said he was some kind of CEO, someone important. He looked different now, standing outside in the cold night. His tie was slightly loose and there were faint dark circles under his eyes. He spoke with the doctor for a moment before turning to walk toward his car. His little girl was asleep in the back seat, her small face pale but peaceful. Lena tried not to stare, but when he glanced in her direction, their eyes met. He seemed surprised to see her still there. He remembered her face instantly, the nurse who had stayed beside his daughter when the fever spiked, who had spoken softly to calm her down when she cried for her mother. "You're still here?" he asked quietly, his voice low and calm. Lena hesitated. "Yes, sir. My shift just ended." He looked around, noticing the nearly empty parking lot. "Do you have a ride?" She shook her head. "No, I'll manage. It's not far." But it was a lie. She had nowhere to go. He could see the small travel bag beside her feet. Something about the way she stood, tired, cold, trying to hide her situation, stirred something in him. He had seen that look before in the mirror years ago after his wife passed away. The man hesitated for a second before speaking again. "You shouldn't be out here in this weather. Can I drop you somewhere?" Lena quickly shook her head. "Thank you, sir. I'll be fine." He gave a small sigh. "You helped my daughter. I insist." For a moment, Lena didn't know what to say. She looked at the car, then at him. The warmth inside the vehicle tempted her, but she didn't want to seem desperate. Still, the cold bit deeper into her bones and her legs felt weak. After a pause, she nodded slowly. "All right. Just to the bus station, please." He opened the door for her. Inside, the car was warm and quiet. The little girl was sleeping soundly, a small blanket tucked under her chin. Lena smiled softly at the sight. The man sat down beside her. "She's finally resting," he said, glancing at his daughter. "She hasn't slept well in days." "She's a strong child," Lena replied gently. "She just needed a bit of care." He looked at Lena thoughtfully. "You stayed with her almost every hour, didn't you?" Lena gave a small smile. "I didn't want her to feel alone." For a while, silence filled the car. The city lights passed outside the window. Dark streets, empty sidewalks, the occasional flicker of a shop sign. The man's voice broke the quiet. "I didn't catch your name." "Lena," she said softly. "I'm Ethan," he replied simply. They didn't speak much after that. The driver took a turn onto a quieter road, and Ethan noticed Lena's eyes starting to close from exhaustion. She looked fragile in the dim light, like someone who had been carrying too much for too long. When they reached the bus station, Ethan frowned. The place looked almost abandoned. The wind howled through the empty benches and the ticket booth was closed for the night. "Are you sure this is fine?" he asked. Lena nodded quickly. "Yes, I'll wait here until morning." He stared at her, realizing she was trying to hide something. No one in their right mind would wait there all night in this cold. Something inside him, perhaps instinct, perhaps empathy, refused to let her stay. "Do you have a place to go, Lena?" he asked quietly. She looked down, twisting her fingers together. "It's just temporary. I'll find something soon." He studied her face. Her words were calm, but her eyes told a different story. He could see the struggle, the pride, the quiet pain of someone who didn't want pity. "Get back in the car," he said gently. "It's too cold for you to stay here." She hesitated. "Sir, I can't." "Please," he said firmly, but not unkindly. "You helped my daughter when I couldn't. Let me help you now." Lena finally nodded and got back inside. The warmth hit her like a soft blanket, and she closed her eyes for a second, feeling her fingers slowly regain life. Ethan looked at her again and said quietly, "I'm not sure if this will sound strange, but I have a proposal for you." She turned to him, uncertain. "A proposal?" "Yes," he said, his voice calm but serious. "You need a home. And I need a mother for my child." For a moment, Lena thought she had misheard him. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. I don't understand," she stammered. Ethan leaned back, looking out the window for a second before continuing. "My daughter has been through a lot since her mother passed away. She needs someone patient and kind around her, someone who can make her feel safe again. I've seen how she looks at you. You remind her of something she's been missing." Lena sat frozen, unsure what to say. "But sir, I'm just a nurse. I can't—" "I'm not asking for charity or romance," he interrupted gently. "I'm asking for a chance for my daughter to have someone in her life who cares. You'd have a place to stay. You'd be helping her more than you can imagine." The car grew silent. The weight of his words hung in the air. Lena's eyes dropped to her hands. 100 thoughts rushed through her mind. She had always believed life would be simple. Work hard, save money, build a quiet life. But life hadn't been kind to her lately. Still, the idea of accepting such an offer from a man she barely knew felt impossible. "I appreciate your kindness," she said softly, "but I can't accept something like that. It wouldn't feel right." Ethan nodded slowly as if he expected that answer. "I understand," he said quietly. "But if you ever change your mind, my door will be open. You know where to find me." The car pulled up near an all-night cafe so she could stay warm. Lena thanked him and stepped out, the cold air hitting her face again. The car drove away, disappearing into the fog. She stood there for a long time, her mind spinning with what had just happened. His words echoed in her head. "You need a home, and I need a mother for my child." It sounded like something from another world, too strange, too sudden, but there had been no mockery in his eyes, only sincerity. She could see he wasn't just a rich man offering help. He was a lonely father trying to fill the silence in his home. Inside the cafe, she ordered a small cup of coffee and sat near the window, watching the snowfall. Her reflection stared back at her, tired, lost, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. Yet somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark of hope stirred, one she hadn't felt in a long time. She didn't know what would happen next, but she couldn't forget the look in his eyes, the quiet sadness of a man who had everything yet still felt empty. And though she didn't know it yet, that one cold night was about to change both of their lives forever. The morning light crept slowly into the small cafe, painting soft gold across the windows. Lena had fallen asleep on her seat, her head resting on her arms. The half-empty cup of coffee had gone cold hours ago. When she opened her eyes, her body ached from the uncomfortable position, but it was better than sleeping outside in the cold. She checked her phone. No messages, no missed calls, nothing new. The world had gone on without her. She washed her face in the small restroom and looked at her reflection. The nurse uniform she still wore was wrinkled, and her eyes were tired but calm. She told herself she would find a way. She always did. She just needed a little more time. As she stepped outside, the air was still cold, but the sunlight made it softer. The city had started to wake up. Cars honking, people rushing to work, the smell of bread from a nearby bakery. For a brief moment, she let herself breathe it all in. But the calm didn't last long. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from the hospital. They needed her to come in for the morning shift. She smiled faintly. Work meant distraction, and distraction meant she didn't have to think about where she would sleep tonight. When she arrived at the hospital, the familiar sounds comforted her. The rolling of carts, the soft beeps of machines, the quiet chatter among nurses. Her heart settled a little. She changed quickly into her clean uniform and got to work. Midday passed quietly. She moved from room to room, checking on patients, helping doctors and writing reports. Then she noticed something unusual. A little girl sitting in the waiting area with a small backpack and a bright red scarf. Lena recognized her instantly. It was the CEO's daughter, the same child she had cared for. Before she could approach, the girl's face lit up. "Lena," she said, running toward her. The sound of her tiny voice made Lena's heart lift. She bent down and hugged her. "Hey, sweetheart. What are you doing here?" The girl pointed toward the hallway. "Daddy's talking to the doctor." Lena glanced down the hall and saw him standing there, deep in conversation with the head physician. He was dressed sharply again, but there was something softer about him today, less guarded, maybe even relieved. When he noticed Lena, he excused himself from the doctor and walked over. "I didn't expect to see you here this morning," he said with a small smile. Lena nodded. "They called me in for another shift." He hesitated for a moment before saying, "I was hoping to see you, actually." She blinked in surprise. "Me?" He nodded again. "I wasn't sure if you'd be here. I wanted to talk to you about last night." Lena's cheeks grew warm. "You mean what you said in the car?" "Yes," he said simply. "I know it sounded strange, maybe too sudden, but I meant every word." She didn't know how to respond. She looked down at the little girl holding her hand. "Your daughter seems better." "She is," he said softly, watching her. "Thanks to you." He paused, then added, "Can we talk somewhere quiet?" "Just for a few minutes." Lena hesitated, but finally nodded. They walked to the small garden behind the hospital, where a few benches sat under leafless trees. The winter air was cool but not unbearable. The sounds of the city felt far away here. Ethan sat down first, resting his hands on his knees. "I don't usually ask for help," he began slowly. "I built everything I have by being in control, by not depending on anyone. But ever since my wife passed, I've been lost." Lena listened quietly. She could see how hard it was for him to talk about it. "My daughter doesn't remember much," he continued. "She was only 3 when it happened. But she still asks about her mother sometimes, especially at night. I try to fill that space for her, but I can't." Lena felt her throat tighten. She didn't interrupt. "When I saw you with her," he said, "I saw something I haven't seen in years, peace. You spoke to her like she mattered, not like a patient or a stranger's child. You made her laugh." He paused. "And that laugh, it changed something in me." Lena looked at him, unsure what to say. "I was just doing my job," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, you were doing more than that. You cared." The silence stretched between them. The sound of wind rustled the dry branches overhead. Finally, Lena spoke. "I understand how much you love your daughter. But what you asked me, I don't know if I'm the right person for something like that. I don't even have my own place right now. That's exactly why I want to help you," he said, his tone steady. "You helped us when you didn't have to. Let me do the same for you." She looked at him carefully, searching for any hint of pity, but there was none. His eyes were calm, sincere. "You wouldn't owe me anything," he added. "You could live in the guest house on my property. You'd still work as a nurse if you want, or just help part-time with my daughter. It's not a job offer, it's an arrangement built on trust." Lena frowned slightly. "People will talk if they find out." He gave a small smile. "People always talk. I stopped caring a long time ago." She let out a slow breath. "And your daughter? What if she doesn't want that?" "She already asked if she could see you again," he said quietly. "You've made more difference to her in 2 days than anyone else in months." Lena's chest tightened at his words. She thought of the little girl's bright eyes, the way she held her hand without fear. Maybe it wasn't about money or offers, it was about kindness. Still, she wasn't sure. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Of course," he said. "There's no pressure. But I'll be honest, Lena, I'd feel better knowing you're not spending another night without a roof over your head." She looked away, embarrassed that he had noticed her situation. "I'll manage," she murmured. He reached into his pocket and handed her a folded piece of paper. "This is my address. If you decide you need a place to stay even for one night, come here. No questions asked." She took it reluctantly, tucking it into her pocket. "Thank you," she said quietly. He stood, adjusting his coat. "I should go. My daughter's waiting." He started to walk away, then turned back. "Lena, sometimes the people we least expect end up saving us." With that, he left. Lena sat on the bench long after he was gone, staring at the paper in her hand. The sun was setting, the air growing colder again. Her heart felt heavy, confused. Part of her wanted to forget the whole thing, to keep her life simple, safe, predictable. But another part of her, the part that had been alone for too long, whispered that maybe this was the change she needed. That night, she didn't have the strength to go far. She returned to the hospital's waiting area and sat quietly with her bag. The guards didn't bother her. They'd seen her often enough to look the other way. Hours passed. She tried to sleep sitting up, but the chair was hard and the noise of footsteps echoed every few minutes. Around midnight, the wind outside grew harsh again, rattling the glass doors. She pulled her coat tighter around her and closed her eyes, but all she could think of was the small red scarf and the little girl's smile. At some point, she drifted off. When she woke up, a hospital janitor was gently nudging her shoulder. "Miss, visiting hours are over. You can't stay here," Lena apologized, gathering her things quickly. She stepped outside into the icy morning air. The sky was gray, the kind that promised snow. She shivered and began to walk, unsure of where she was going. After a few blocks, she stopped. Her fingers touched the paper still in her pocket. Ethan's address. She pulled it out and stared at the words written neatly on it. Her heart pounded. She stood there for a long moment, torn between pride and need. Then she sighed softly and whispered to herself, "Just for one night." She found a cab and gave the driver the address. The ride took almost half an hour, and as they left the crowded streets behind, the houses grew larger and more distant from one another. When they finally stopped, Lena looked out the window and saw a tall iron gate and a long driveway lined with trees. The house at the end looked more like a mansion than a home. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped out. She hesitated, unsure if she was doing the right thing. Before she could change her mind, the gate opened slowly. A security guard nodded politely. "You must be Lena, the boss said to let you in." Her heart jumped. He had been expecting her. The car rolled forward until it stopped near the main door. The house lights glowed warmly against the dark sky. For the first time in weeks, Lena felt something close to safety, but also fear. She didn't know what awaited her beyond that door, only that her life was about to change again. And somewhere inside that big, quiet house, a little girl waited, hoping the kind nurse from the hospital would really come back. Lena stood outside the large house, her small bag hanging from her shoulder. The night was cold and still, and she could hear nothing but the faint rustle of leaves. The front door opened before she could knock. A woman in her 50s wearing a neat uniform smiled kindly. "You must be Lena," she said warmly. "Come in, dear. We've been expecting you." Lena hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside. The warmth hit her immediately, and she exhaled deeply, as if she'd been holding her breath for days. The house was quiet but not empty. There was a soft hum of life, the smell of food coming from the kitchen, and a fire crackling faintly somewhere deeper inside. The woman led her to a small sitting room. "The guest room is ready for you. The young miss is already asleep. You can meet her in the morning." Lena nodded shyly. "Thank you," the woman smiled. "I'm Mary, I help around here. If you need anything, just ask." Lena thanked her again. She followed Mary upstairs, her steps soft on the thick carpet. The guest room was bright and simple. Cream-colored walls, a warm blanket, and a window that looked out over the garden. It was more comfort than she'd had in months. When Mary left, Lena sat on the bed and took a long breath. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't cold. She looked around the room, touching the blanket, the lamp, even the little vase of flowers by the window. Everything felt unreal. She pulled out the small photo she always kept in her bag, a picture of her parents before they passed away. She placed it on the bedside table and whispered, "I hope I'm doing the right thing." Sleep came slowly, but when it did, it was deep and peaceful. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains. Lena woke up to the faint sound of laughter from downstairs. She quickly freshened up and stepped out of her room, unsure where to go. The house was big, with wide halls and polished floors. As she reached the staircase, she saw the little girl sitting on the floor, surrounded by building blocks. When she looked up and saw Lena, her face lit up. "You came," the girl said excitedly, jumping up. Lena smiled, her heart softening. "Of course I did. You didn't think I'd forget you, did you?" The girl ran to her and hugged her tightly. It was a small, innocent gesture, but it warmed something inside Lena that had been frozen for too long. A few moments later, Ethan appeared at the bottom of the stairs holding a cup of coffee. He looked different this morning, relaxed, almost relieved. "Good morning," he said with a small smile. "Good morning," Lena replied politely. "I hope you slept well," he said. "I did. Thank you for letting me stay," he nodded. "I'm glad you're here. She's been talking about you since she woke up." Lena glanced at the girl who was now trying to build a tower of blocks again. "She's very sweet," she said softly. "She is," he replied. "But she hasn't been this happy in a long time." They stood there for a moment, a quiet understanding passing between them. Later that morning, Mary served breakfast in the dining room. Lena was hesitant to sit at the large table, but Ethan gestured for her to join them. The little girl chattered nonstop between bites of toast, telling stories from the hospital and asking if Lena would stay forever. Lena laughed softly. "Let's start with today," she said kindly. After breakfast, Ethan had to leave for work. Before he left, he turned to Lena. "Please treat this place like your own home. If you need anything, Mary will help. I'll be back by evening." When he was gone, the house felt different. Still big and quiet, but now filled with the sound of a child's laughter. Lena spent the day helping around the house, reading stories and playing with the little girl. It felt strange at first, being part of someone else's world, but the warmth of it slowly began to sink in. In the afternoon, they went out to the garden. The sun was gentle, and the girl ran among the trees, picking flowers and showing them proudly to Lena. Watching her, Lena felt something stir inside her, a quiet peace she hadn't known she missed. Mary joined her on the bench. "She hasn't smiled this much since her mother passed," she said softly. Lena looked down. "She's a lovely child. I just want her to feel safe." Mary nodded knowingly. "You have a good heart. He must see that too." Lena didn't know what to say. She simply smiled and turned her gaze back to the child. When evening came, Ethan returned home. The moment his daughter saw him, she ran into his arms, talking excitedly about her day with Lena. He listened, smiling faintly, though his eyes often flicked toward Lena as if trying to read her expression. Dinner that night was quiet but comfortable. For the first time, Lena didn't feel like an outsider. She laughed when the little girl dropped her spoon, and even Ethan seemed to relax, joining their conversation occasionally. After dinner, when the child went to bed, Ethan walked Lena to the hallway. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" she asked. "For bringing life back into this house," he replied. "It's been empty for too long." Lena didn't know what to say. His tone wasn't romantic, it was grateful, honest. That made it even more touching. Days turned into weeks. Lena's presence became a part of their daily life. She still worked part-time at the hospital, but she spent the rest of her time helping at the house and caring for the child. They developed a small routine: breakfast together, walks in the garden, bedtime stories every night. She had thought it would feel temporary, but somehow it began to feel like home. The house no longer seemed cold and lonely. The little girl's laughter filled the rooms, and even Ethan seemed lighter. One evening, as Lena was folding laundry, Mary walked in with a knowing smile. "You've changed this place, you know," she said. Lena laughed softly. "I don't think so." "Oh, you have," Mary said. "Before you came, it was all silence. Now it feels like a family again." Lena didn't answer, but her cheeks grew warm. She tried to ignore the thought that maybe, deep down, she was beginning to feel the same. But not everyone saw things that way. One afternoon, when Lena went to the grocery store nearby, she overheard two women whispering near the counter. "Did you hear about that nurse staying at his place?" one said. "The CEO's house." The other woman smirked. "Of course. People like her always find a way to move up." Lena froze, pretending not to hear, but the words hit her hard. She walked out quietly, her chest tight. That night, she sat by the window in her room, staring at the lights outside. Doubt crept into her heart. Maybe people would never understand. Maybe, no matter how honest her intentions were, they would twist the story into something ugly. When Ethan knocked on her door later to check if everything was fine, she smiled faintly and said she was just tired, but her mind was restless. The next morning, she made breakfast early and went to the hospital for her shift without telling anyone. She worked longer than usual, trying to clear her thoughts. When she returned that evening, Ethan met her at the door. He looked worried. "You left early today." I was starting to think you weren't coming back. Lena looked at him, unsure how to explain. I just needed some time to think. He studied her face carefully. Did something happen? She hesitated, then shook her head. No, it's nothing. I just don't want people to misunderstand things. Ethan frowned slightly. People will always talk. You can't live your life trying to silence them. I know, she said softly, looking down. But I also don't want to cause any trouble for you. He stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. Lena, you haven't caused trouble. You've brought peace. She looked up at him then, and for a brief second their eyes met with quiet understanding. It wasn't love, not yet. It was trust, respect, and something deeper forming slowly, like the beginning of warmth after a long winter. That night, when she tucked the little girl into bed, the child held her hand tightly and whispered, "Please don't go away again." Lena smiled, brushing the hair from her forehead. "I'm not going anywhere," she said softly. But deep down, she wasn't sure if she could keep that promise. Outside, the house glowed warmly against the dark sky. Inside, three hearts were slowly learning to belong again, though none of them realized how fragile that balance was or how easily it could break. When the sun rose over the city that morning, the big house felt empty again. Ethan woke up to silence. The smell of coffee that usually came from the kitchen was gone. The soft humming that Lena often did while helping Mia get ready for school wasn't there either. It was strange how quickly he had gotten used to the sound of another person moving through the house. Now it felt like it had all disappeared overnight. He walked downstairs, calling her name softly, but there was no answer. The breakfast table was clean, except for a small folded note. His chest tightened as he picked it up. The note was short. Lena's handwriting was neat, but he could tell she had written it in a rush. "Thank you for everything, but I think it's better if I go. You've already done too much for me. Please tell Mia I'll always be grateful for her smiles." He stared at those words for a long time. It didn't make sense. Everything had been fine just yesterday. They had all eaten dinner together, laughing about Mia's funny drawings. Lena had seemed quieter than usual, but he thought she was just tired. Now she was gone. No explanation, no goodbye, just that note. Mia came downstairs, rubbing her eyes, holding her stuffed bear. When she saw her father standing there, she looked around. "Where's Aunt Lena?" she asked in her sleepy voice. Ethan forced a small smile, not wanting her to worry. "She had to go somewhere for a little while," he said softly. But Mia's face fell. "She promised she'd take me to the park today." Ethan crouched down, trying to comfort her, but his words sounded hollow. He felt the same emptiness his daughter did. It wasn't just about the routine. It was about the warmth Lena had brought into their lives. The house had come alive with her in it, and now it felt like it had turned back into a quiet building made of walls and echoes. The hours that followed were long. Ethan went to work, but he couldn't focus. Every meeting, every phone call felt pointless. His mind kept going back to the note. He replayed every moment from the last few days, searching for signs he had missed. Maybe she felt out of place, maybe she heard something from someone. He remembered the whispers from a few employees and friends, the ones who liked to gossip. Maybe someone had said something to her. He sighed heavily. He had tried so hard to make her feel comfortable, but maybe it wasn't enough. Maybe his words that night, the ones that started everything, had made her believe she was only there out of pity or convenience. That thought bothered him deeply. By the time he returned home that evening, Mia was waiting by the window, hoping Lena might return. "She'll come back, won't she?" she asked quietly. Ethan didn't know what to say. He wanted to promise her yes, but he didn't want to give her false hope. He just held her close and whispered, "I hope so." Days passed, but Lena didn't come back. Ethan's home returned to its old rhythm, the one he once thought he preferred. Everything was neat, quiet, and in order. But it all felt wrong now. He caught himself waiting for the sound of her laughter, the soft way she spoke to Mia, the calmness she brought into the chaos of his days. He realized how much she had changed them. Not just his daughter, but him too. One night, as he sat alone in his study, he noticed a small drawing pinned on the corkboard behind his desk. It was one of Mia's drawings, a picture of the three of them holding hands standing under a house with a big sun above it. Underneath it, in her uneven handwriting, she had written, "My family." That's when it hit him. It wasn't just about missing Lena's help or her presence. She had become part of their family without him even realizing it. The next morning, Ethan made up his mind. He had to find her, not to bring her back for his daughter, but because he needed to tell her what she truly meant to them. He started by calling the hospital she used to work at, but they said she had transferred to another facility. Ow, how I feel. You've given me back hope I didn't think I'd ever have. Lena looked down, her heart full. She had never expected anything like this when she first met him. She had only wanted to survive, to find a place to rest. Now she had found more than she ever dreamed. A home, a family, and someone who truly saw her. The next morning she woke early and watched the sunrise from the porch. The light spread slowly across the sky, turning everything golden. She thought about the journey that brought her here. The struggles, the nights she cried alone. The moment she met Ethan. Every step had led her to this peace. When Ethan joined her, holding 2 cups of coffee, she smiled. "You were right," she said. "This place feels different now." He handed her a cup and sat beside her. "That's because we made new memories here." They watched the sun rise in silence. It wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of something steady, something real. When they returned home later that week, Mia rushed to show her teacher a seashell she had found by the lake. She said proudly, "It's from when we went to our home by the water." Lena and Ethan exchanged a glance and smiled. That night, as Lena tucked Mia into bed, the little girl whispered, "I love our family." Lena's heart swelled. "I love it too." After Mia fell asleep, she went downstairs. Ethan was sitting on the couch going through some papers. When he saw her, he set them aside. "She said she wants to go back to the lake next month," he said with a chuckle. Lena smiled. "I think she just liked all the marshmallows." He laughed softly, then turned serious. "Lena, there's something I've been meaning to say. I know our lives came together in an unusual way, but I wouldn't change a thing. You brought life back into this house. You made it a home." Her eyes met his and she nodded slowly. "And you gave me the courage to believe I deserve one." He reached out and took her hand gently. "Then let's keep building it together." There was no need for grand words or promises. In that quiet moment, everything was understood. 2 hearts that had once been broken had found peace in each other. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying the sound of laughter from upstairs where Mia was still awake, playing with her stuffed bear. Ethan looked toward the ceiling and smiled. "She's happy again," he said softly. Lena followed his gaze. "She's not the only one," she whispered. And for the first time in years, they both felt the same thing, a deep, quiet certainty that they had finally found what they had been missing all along. Not perfection, not wealth, not escape, but a home. Built not from walls and rooms, but from love, understanding, and second chances.